this message.
America was not built on a firm foundation. The nation called America was doomed from its inception. How do you build a nation? Killing the native people. How do you build a nation? Bringing a whole people out of Africa to America to be made slaves. This is your foundation. The world is looking at a country going to hell. You are opting to be a part of that is unraveling right in front of your eyes. You see the country cascading downward. This is America. Why do you want to get into something that is coming to an end? So we are living in the time of the unraveling of this great nation.
I was told to deliver this message.
Assalamu alaikum, family. It's your brother Landon X, and this is NationTown TV, and we hitting y'all with another live edition of NationTown TV Live. First, let me start off in the proper fashion. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, who mercifully appeared to us in the person of Master W. Fard Muhammad, to whom praises are forever due. I further bear witness that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is at minimum, his messenger, but maximum exalted Christ. If you understand, keep watching NationTown TV and you might get an understanding. But I wouldn't even have an understanding of those two great men if it were not for this great man, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who, as you just saw on that magnificent trailer, will be speaking to the world, not just to the Muslims, but to the world, July 4th, 2020. And I am certain that he will encompass and cover many of the things that are going on in the world and going on with the people of God. And in those three great names, I greet the people of God in the words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Shout out to everybody chiming in. Sister Linda J, Jamila, El-Amin Fuller, Shahina Muhammad, Brother Hodari, Assalamu alaikum. Brother Tevis, wa alaikum salam, Top Soldier, Brother Khalid, James Muhammad. We appreciate y'all chiming in. And of course, with every NationTown TV Live, feel free to hit us with questions, comments, and just let us know what's on your mind. This is an interactive thing when we go live on NationTown TV. But as you can see, as always, with the caption up there, it points out quite clearly that this is the third installment of what we've been talking about, the Hijacked Movement. And I really hope this is the last, because I did not intend to do another installment of this. But you know, the writing is just is too bold on the wall. The writing is on the wall. At NationTown TV, we want to be on the edge and the cusp of what's going on with our people. But if you can see the subtitle, it says a hijacked movement, or is it a hijacked mind? Hijacked movement or hijacked mind, or is it a little bit of both? Y'all chime in and let me know. What do you think? Do you think the movement? And when I say the movement, I'm gonna clarify that a little bit more as we go on. I won't be on long, but by movement, I mean specifically what we've been seeing going on with our people since the George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery murders, cold-blooded murders. And not so much just the protests, not so much, what we've seen in the streets, but whenever the narrative is changed, whenever all of a sudden people who only talked about sport and play, only talked about Real Housewives of Atlanta, only talked about, rap beefs, only talked about each other, only talked about foolishness, are all of a sudden talking about, justice, all of a sudden talking about freedom, all of a sudden talking about equality, all of a sudden talking about reparations, all of a sudden talking about the minister, all of a sudden talking about all the things that we really should always have at the forefront of our mind. Not saying you got to be black, blackety black, super black, pro black all day, you black banging over breakfast. But as a black man or woman in America, or Aboriginal man or woman in America, it's always put in your face that you are the Aboriginal people in this world, and it's always put in your face in the most negative fashion. So why not have it at the forefront of your mind? But since we have this movement of our minds as well as movement of our feet in the streets with the so-called protests and uprisings, I prefer the word uprising over riot, even though they have been infiltrated. With this movement, has it been hijacked? At this point, it's not even a question. But NationTown TV, for those of you who follow us regularly, you know that sometimes we are blessed enough with the permission of Allah to bring something up, even an angle on a particular event or situation, and then the number one independent and baddest black newspaper in the world, the Final Call, sometimes will follow us up with something that vindicates or validates what we come with. That's happened numerous times over the last 3 years that we've been touching bases with y'all. And this week's Final Call cover story really hit on that, and it hit it hard. As you can see, the title is as clear as day. Prosecutors accuse active duty military officer and accomplice of infiltrating a movement with the intent to kill. Infiltrating a movement with the intent to kill. Now, if it be the will of Allah, what I want to do is tie up this smoking gun that the Final Call, shout out to all the wonderful writers and Final Call newspaper, the baddest publication in the world. Shout out to Sister Charlene. Also shout out to Brother Brian who wrote this particular article. But shout out to y'all, because it is a hard-hitting article, but I'm also going to use it, as a means to kind of anchor the point that we've been making on NationTown TV. First and foremost, let me go into some details about this particular article, and you're going to see some things in this article that will, if you've been watching, if you've been paying attention, if you've been ear hustling, at least ear hustling NationTown TV, it's gonna make your ears, ring a little bit. First of all, it says, and before we even go forward, what you're looking at right now is an actual screenshot from finalcalldigital.com. If you do not have a digital description of the Final Call newspaper, you losing in life. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what's going on with you. Go to church, pray on it. Whatever you got to do, get your life together. But you cannot be found black. You cannot be found Aboriginal without a subscription to the Final Call newspaper, digital or otherwise. Just go to finalcalldigital.com and get your life together. But with that said, let's take a look at a few snippets. I ain't gonna give you the whole game. The game is to be sold, not to be told. But I'm gonna give you just a little bit of snippets of what's going on with this particular story. But like I said, I want you to kind of go through it in your mind about what's going on overall. Now, it says Air Force Staff Sergeant Stephen Carrillo. Now, for those who don't know, Carrillo is for the most part a Spanish name that you see often with our Aboriginal, so-called Hispanic people here in America. And if you look at him, he don't quite look like a Ken doll, but I ain't gonna go there right now. But anyway, he shot and killed a 53-year-old brother, David Patrick Underwood, who was a Federal Protective Service officer who was working outside the Ronald V. Dellums Federal Building, said federal authorities. The officer and his partner, who survived the shooting, were working in the same night as anti-brutality demonstrators took to Oakland streets. So this was during the so-called George Floyd uprisings. And then it goes on to say, but he added, the fact that police, no, this is later on in the story, by the way, but this is a point I wanted to really highlight. The fact that police know that there is an infiltration, please listen, the fact that police know that there is an infiltration of anarchists and terrorists is much more concerning. It makes one think of the covert operations of the CIA and the National Security Agency. History has shown that in our movements, these people appear, and check this out, and we don't know where they come from. And we do not know where they come from. Now, before we go further, it's another part of that I want to go over. But before we go further, I want to, encourage all those watching. Hit us up with questions, comments. We'll definitely try to get to them. But what we've been talking about on NationTown, it's not been something as diabolical. Well, actually, it is quite diabolical, but not quite as, I guess you could say, bloody, instantly bloody, because usually the enemy plays the long game. But in this situation, these individuals were part of a kind of anti-government, racist, terrorist group. But this is just an example that if they can do this, if they will do this, if they are doing this, what other things are they doing in the midst of a chaotic, unorganized movement? That's always been the point, always been the reason for us going through this and going over this. So I just wanted that to kind of tap dance on your mind a little bit. Let me point out this last point from the article. The actual name of it was the Boogaloo Boys, the group that they were a part of. Like I said, it's an anti-government group, and they adopted the name from Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo. I know it sounds strange, but if you do a little quick history lesson on all of these anti-government groups, they usually kind of have weird old names. That's kind of something that's common in this arena. But it says they, like Charles Manson of years earlier, use a vomit mixture of ideologies and motives to weasel their way into hip hop culture to spread corruption and division for their ultimate gain. Manson, back in his day, called it helter skelter. Let me go back and read this one more again. He says they, like Charles Manson of years earlier, use a vomit mixture of ideologies and motives to weasel their way, slink their way into hip hop culture to spread corruption and division and division and division and division for their ultimate gain. Now, the thing that kind of pressed me to want to do this third installment of this topic is the fact that, I just got to call a spade a spade. I've seen a lot of division amongst the Aboriginal people throughout social media, particularly on Facebook. And even though I'm not active on Twitter, I saw a lot of messages being, I guess you could say, screenshotted and posted and went viral on Facebook from Twitter to Facebook and vice versa. And what really bothers me is when I see some of our best and brightest. What bothers me even more than that is when I see people who would consider themselves what we know in our teachings, our supreme wisdom lesson teachings, as 5%ers. And I don't mean necessarily the nations of gods and earth. I'm talking about all those who know and understand and have some level of understanding of the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. We have fallen for this trick in many aspects. And then there are other people, intelligent Aboriginal people outside of the nation, falling for this trick. I mean, I'm talking hook, line, and sinker. And here we are in the middle of it, in the midst of it in NationTown. Man, we've been on y'all head on this topic. But, Negroes don't listen sometimes. But the thing that got me is just the severity of this particular story. The severity of it. A brother lost his life. And what they were doing, what they were hoping in committing this act, it was a brother that lost his life, and then what appears to be, based on his name and his face, an actual Hispanic brother who has aligned himself with what is essentially a Aryan and mostly white organization that is anti-government and also anti-black. But just like the Charles Manson situation years ago, they killed random white people and tried to make it like they were killed by black people, trying to incite a race war. Many people believe that the Atlanta child murders of the 1980s was also an attempt to ignite a race war. So what you see is a situation where someone was caught red-handed, figuratively and literally. This is an Aboriginal man whose Spanish name and Spanish mind, and when I say Spanish, I'm talking about the European Spanish, has tricked him into thinking that he's something other than what he is, and then he's played along with this situation. I would not be surprised if he's nothing more than a pawn in this whole situation. He probably didn't even pull the trigger. But he was tricked into playing along with this situation, and a brother was killed. Now, what does this have to do with us? It has everything to do with us. One thing I want to remind you of, in case you have not had the mental and physical or testicular fortitude to do it yet, please read Message to the Black Man. And one page on Message to the Black Man that has always shook me up. And it really, I don't want to say bothers me, but it really strikes me every time I look at it. I can never look at this particular page and just gloss over it. But this is page 100 of Message to the Black Man. All bold at the top, all caps, the devil. And then it has a subtitle, Devils Fool and Disgrace You. And then the very first sentence says, and this is the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad talking, Almighty Allah God and the Nation of Islam elsewhere, Asia and Africa, the islands, are grieved and hurt to the heart to see you walking into the trap your enemies, the devils, have and still are setting for you. This is the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad saying that God, who appeared to us in the person of Master W. Fard Muhammad, is grieved and hurt to his heart. God has emotions. He has control over his emotions. We're going to talk about emotions in a minute as well. But it grieves him that we fall for the same. See, Allah, whether you read Bible or Quran, you can even delve into other spiritual and religious ideologies. God is always merciful to the ignorant. He's always merciful, especially to the ignorant who have not had what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan calls, they have not had mental intercourse with a man of God. Meaning that, you know, they have not had the opportunity themselves to run into someone who's tried to wake them up. God is always merciful to those of us in that situation. You know, that old that old Negro saying, God look out for fools and babies. You know, so he always looks out for those who are actually ignorant, meaning they don't know, and nobody's ever told them. But when we actually know, and we've seen the same game, the same play be ran over and over and over again. Back in the day, I used to watch, you know, the Utah Jazz. I was conflicted when the Jazz played the Bulls in the finals, because on one hand, I wanted to see Jordan lose. You know, I always go for the underdog. But on the other hand, I wanted to see somebody finally stop that pick and roll that the Utah Jazz and John Stockton and Karl Malone would do over and over and over again. It was like nobody could do nothing about it except for the Bulls. I mean, they ran that pick and roll until they couldn't run it no more, literally. But what's even worse is watching this devil run a devilish pick and roll of technology all over the earth for hundreds to thousands of years. And we fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Again, everybody hitting us up. Feel free to hit us with questions, comments. We'll see if we can get to them. Shout out to everybody chiming in. Sister Jalila Muhammad, assalamu alaikum. Shout out to the mighty MUI. We got Brother Daniel E. Muhammad, Hakeem Muhammad, Assalamu alaikum family. But as I was saying, we're talking about the hijacking of a movement. Is it a hijacking of a movement, and or is it a hijacking of the mind? Now, let me say something about movement. I don't want anybody who's watching this now or will watch this after we come off of live to think that, oh, okay, I'm not really involved in the movement, so I'm exempt. No, you're involved with a movement. You know, even if your movement is ignorant, even if your movement is pointless, but you are a walking, talking movement. You know, there's literally a movement happening under your skin right now. Your cells, your organs, your blood vessels, your brain is constantly fighting to survive right now. You don't always feel it, and you really don't feel it unless your body loses a battle. Your immune system loses a battle, meaning that now you got a cold, now you have a disease, now your body is aching in some way. So one way or another, you are always a part of a movement. It could just be a community movement, and if you black, aboriginal, and you ain't somehow at least sympathetic to a community movement, even if you don't have boots on the ground and hands on the plow, if you're not active or at least sympathetic to a community movement, then you're not black. You are officially classified a nigger. You also have organizational movements that you can call movements. The Nation of Islam is far beyond a movement. This is not a movement. We produce movements. But the Nation of Islam is exactly what that first word entails. It is a nation. When you get involved in a marriage, that's one of the most revolutionary movements that an Aboriginal person can get involved in. That's absolutely a movement. Just your friendships, that's a movement. And last but not least, like I said, you yourself are a movement physically and mentally. Because when you wake up in the morning, something's got to happen. You have some effort on. I don't care if you on welfare. I don't care if you're getting 3 or 4 checks. I don't care what's going on. You got to have some kind of the business of life, as the minister calls it, has to be a part of your life. Now, there's another part of this article that I have to highlight, and I really want y'all to pay attention to this, because this really kind of shook me up. It's an actual picture that's in this article in the final call, and it has a caption under it, as pictures normally do in newspapers. But I want you to read this caption. It actually has a picture of a black-owned business that was destroyed during the George Floyd uprisings. Pay attention to this. And it reads, observers say opportunists have used the pain and suffering of blacks to push their own agendas. Many fear any political or economic windfalls will bypass black businesses and communities heavily damaged during the George Floyd protests. I'm going to read that one more again. Observers say opportunists have used the pain and the suffering of blacks to push their own agendas. Pain and suffering. I mean, just think about that. Because again, that brings to mind the situation that you see, and I'm not going to go into details on it because y'all see it just like I see it, of division amongst black people that is flared up. That is flared up just in the last couple of days. Division between genders, division between gender preferences, division just between, I mean, the division is just off the charts. You still got the same usual Negro suspects, as I like to call them, the same usual Negro suspects who now, want to question the minister, even though they've kissed the minister's ring at times. I ain't gonna say no names. You know who he is, but because of envy and the disease in their heart, they're making foolish allegations because they can't call a fly to a turd. So they have things to say. But when you see these kind of things flare up, you always got to ask the question, who's really behind it? What type of people are behind it, and what type of mind is behind it? But I'm going to bring that up one more time because I really want that to sink in. In the backdrop of that picture of a black business being, physically infiltrated and destroyed, we had a sister here in Los Angeles, our dear sister who runs a dojo in Long Beach. Hers was destroyed after she had just recently renovated it, and Allah got her. He definitely got her, but it's terrible when we are so unorganized, because I'd be willing to bet that those who did that, because she's a staple in her community, those who did that did not know what they were doing, or maybe they did. But since we're so unorganized and emotional with every one of our maneuvers, things like that can happen. Like that can absolutely happen. Now, the thing I want to point out, as I mentioned, that we're going to get into emotion. There are 2 ways to kind of push your agenda, regardless of what your agenda is. Your agenda could be positive. Propaganda is really not a bad word. When you propagate something, it could be, God, it could be dope, it could be murder, it could be friendship, it can be love, so your agenda could be anything, positive or negative. But when you're propagating an agenda, you have 2 entryways into the person's mind. You can either drop a seed on their intelligence, or you can drop a seed on their emotions. Our enemy is intelligent enough, and I'm explaining why I say intelligent. Yeah, he's wicked. Yeah, he's evil. He's all of that. Yeah, but he's intelligent enough to make sure that he always drops seeds on our emotions. Here's why it's tough sometimes to drop a seed on intelligence. What I mean by dropping a seed on intelligence is saying, you know what, I'm going to put this book in this brother's hand. You know, like we just went over a message to the black man. You know what, I'm going to invite this brother or sister to the mosque. You know what, I'm going to email this video, this lecture to this brother. I'm gonna email this meme to this brother. I'm gonna email something to him or her that they have to read, that they need to study, that they need to parse. And even if they do, you might run into that brother. You just sent him a copy of How to Eat to Live, and y'all set up and y'all and the two of you, you know, would build on it for hours. And then 3 weeks later, you'll catch him coming out the grocery store, you know, with 3 packs of pork chops, value packs. Come on, y'all know how it go down. Pork rinds in his mouth. You know, working on his 4th or 5th meal of the day. And he'll sit up there, and when you try to remind him, even if you you use proper handling of people, even if you don't condemn him or throw him away, he'll sit up there with pork rind crumbs around his mouth, pork chop, chitlin juice around his mouth, sitting up there reciting to you what he learned from the teachers. Yeah, man, I know. Yeah, man. Oh, man, that book, man, it blew my mind, man, when he's talking about, you know, the eating in the 1 meal a day and the 2, you know, 1 every 2 days, how you can live like 1,000 years, man. That was cold, man. And they'll really chop it up with you. That's because you put that information and that propaganda, and you rested it on their intelligence. But that's like just dropping a seed on the surface, meaning that the ground has to somehow pull it in. And the weather around them has to be a certain kind of weather for the actual seed to germinate. But when you put it in their emotions, when you put something, a propaganda into people's emotions, and sometimes you can put positive things on people's emotions. There used to be a blackboard in all of the Muhammad mosques and temples in the Nation of Islam that said, who will survive the war of Armageddon? And on one side you had a cross and an American flag and a man and a brother hanging from a tree, strange fruit, and then on the other side you had the flag of Islam. And imagine being a guest for the first time at the mosque, and you walk in and you see that. Your emotions get touched. You see a cross right next to a hanging black man. Now, that's actually something we saw all the time in the South, in the deep South, back, you know, pre-segregation, during segregation, and even today, I'm pretty sure that there were lynchings that took place right around the corner from churches. But just seeing that on a blackboard, who will survive the war, the word war of Armageddon? See, that's tagging your emotions, and that caught a lot of people's attention. Some of the greatest teachers and students of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Dr. Khaled, and the greatest of them all, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, they all were great stewards of being able to touch your emotions as well as your mind, or reaching your mind through your emotions. So it's a tool, but when you put it in their emotions, you almost automatically get an instant reaction. You see it in, you know, I use the mosque as an example. You see it in the mosque. You'll see 50 brothers stand up and accept the teachings. 50 of them. 50 of them came. 50 stood up. Because that's that instant emotional impact. You also have that same situation when it's negative. When it's a devilish agenda. You get an instant reaction. If you touch their emotions, you get an instant reaction. You touching something, because you're not just touching something right there on the surface. What you really touching is something happened to them 10, 15 years ago. You touching something that happened 20 years ago. Something that's constantly happened to them over the wheel of time. You might be touching on something that they just recently buried in a shallow grave in their mind. They just got over a relationship, bad friendship, bad situation with a particular person, a particular movement, particular organization. And then you swoop right in and touch it right before they're able to bury it in a proper grave. You touch it right before that, and then it unearths that whole situation. And what happens when they use our division against us? I want you to picture this for a minute. If you've ever seen a train track, And black folks and our Asian brothers and sisters who are also Aboriginal, we're the ones that laid all of these old train tracks from coast to coast here in America. We laid all of those. You know, our Asian brothers and sisters in those internment camps, some of them laid it and were not paid a dime. There's brothers and sisters that did it anyway, they did it as well. But if you see a train track, you see all these planks of wood and they're nailed down. Now we know the real value of wood. We know that trees produce oxygen and all the valuable things and positive things that you can do with wood. But on a train track, they're nailed down. They're no longer able to produce oxygen or produce fruit and all the other things that we get from wood and wooden trees. They nailed down with each other, right next to each other. And the way they're nailed down, it allows any train to smoothly glide over those tracks, back and forth, however it sees fit, to fit somebody's propaganda or business or whatever the situation is, to get products from point A to point B. That's essentially what you have when you fall for the propaganda of your enemy. Shout out to everybody touching in. Brother Khalid Muhammad, Allahu Akbar, dear brother. Sister Amina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, brother Antu Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, dear soldier brother. But we also gonna get into, like we did last time and like we strive to do, we wanna go into solutions. Because the question here is about the hijacking of a movement. And what I'm gonna do before we close out, we're gonna go into questions that you can ask yourself and questions that you can ask an organization. If you're a part of an organization or a movement, remember, we went over all the types of movements you can be in. It could be just your community, organization, marriage, friendships, and your damn self. So there's all kind of movements you can be a part of, but questions to ask yourself that will unearth or expose whether or not, it's almost like a test. You know, all these people testing positive for coronavirus, you know, I'm not making light of that. I pray that they overcome it, but you also have to, you know, test yourself for coronavirus. So we're going to go over some questions you can ask yourself, you know, as an individual, as a movement, that will expose whether or not you test positive for infiltration. Now, I want to bring up something that is one of my favorite quotes from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. This was first brought to my attention by the brother that you see to the far right of this picture. That is our beloved Western Regional Student Minister, Abdul Malik Saeed Muhammad. But on the rostrum one day, he was giving us what he always does. Whenever he meets with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, he blesses us with a what they call table talks, where he blesses us with notes from the conversation that he had with the minister. And he told us that the minister said, never let your enemy choose the theater of your war. And I'm paraphrasing slightly, but that the theater and war, those two words were the exact words the minister used. And then, not that I didn't believe our beloved Western Regional Student Minister, but in a lecture that the minister did a few months later, the minister said the exact same thing from the rostrum of Mosque No. Never let your enemy choose the theater of your war. Now, the minister is a wordsmith, and he's even though he never finished college, being that he was taught by a man that was taught by God, he has a beautiful control of the language and the history of the language. So when he speaks, you know, you got to hit the the thesaurus. You know, you got to hit the dictionary. You also got to hit the history book. So I'm going to let you, for those who may not be clear on theater of war and what that means. Theater of war, in warfare, theater is an area in which important military events occur or are progressing. A theater can include the entirety of the airspace, land, and sea, area that is or that may potentially become involved in war operations. That's the theater of war. So when you see a war like one of the most famous, battles, the beach of Normandy in World War II, that was the theater of war. But there can also be figurative theaters of war. And the reason why I brought this up is because the worst thing about this recent movement after the George Floyd murder is the fact that the theater of war has been manipulated. The theater of war, for example, those who are asking the question, where is Farrakhan? Where are the Muslims? One thing that the Nation of Islam has never done, and you can go and Message to the Black Man, I believe it's on page 315, because at the end of Message to the Black Man, and I was reminded of this by a brother, one of my friends on Facebook, Brother David Muhammad, who's a veteran FOI. He reminded me that at the end of Message to the Black Man, there's a question and answer segment. Essentially, after the book is over, the messenger answers a lot of questions, and I believe it's on page 315. I may be wrong about that. But he points out that the Muslims, the Nation of Islam, we don't jump into, violence just for the sake of violence. We don't jump into every little movement. We don't just run into every little, dust up that sets up. That's how you get caught up. He says we don't participate in any unnecessary violence whatsoever. This is the message. This is the most honorable Elijah Muhammad speaking. Because that is allowing your enemy to set the theater of the war. Who says that in order for us, listen, if our salvation, if our freedom, if our justice, if our equality was based on rioting, was based on picket signs, based on destroying property, regardless of whose property it is, if it was based on that, we'd be freed in a mug by now. And one of the best and most freest places with the most justice and the most equality would be right here where I am in Los Angeles. We had the Watts riots. Before that, with our Hispanic brothers, was the Zoot Suit riots. Look that up. The Watts riots. We had the LA riots. And then they participated most recently in the George Floyd demonstrations. What has that ever really accomplished? When you really understand the nature of this enemy, what does it really accomplish? What it accomplishes is your enemy setting the theater of your war. The theater of your war. And one thing I noticed that was really positive, after this George Floyd, all of these uprisings, I started to notice that because of institutions like the Nation of Islam, because of some of our best and brightest, the enemy started getting afraid, because one of the biggest differences between the George Floyd uprisings and previous uprisings is that most of them took place in white neighborhoods. And about 80% of those in the crowds were also Caucasian. So white businesses started to get scared, because white businesses, and not your typical, drug store, a gas station in the hood, a liquor store, but white businesses like Macy's, fast food restaurants, high-end restaurants were being destroyed. So now I'm getting emails from Postmates talking about support black businesses. So there was a little slight movement of white people and white businesses, trying to, win our favor so we wouldn't take our dollar from them. And when I saw that, I said, oh, okay. But just as that was bubbling to the surface, then that's when you saw all these other distractions pop up. That's when you saw, as of this week, you have black people. How did the narrative behind these movements, George Floyd, who is a black male, Ahmaud Arbery, a black male, and I understand we had Breonna Taylor, but in none of these situations was it an issue of a black man not protecting a black woman, but now all of a sudden, that's the talk of the town on black social media. Who was really pulling these strings? When you on Twitter or Facebook, don't assume. That's the beauty of us being able to go live and you can see my face moving in front of you. Because don't assume that just when you see a post on social media that that's Kiki, that that's Shaniqua. That might not be Kiki posting that. That might be Karen. So be very aware of what you're looking at and be aware if you're not sure what you're looking at. When an unrighteous man or woman brings you news, look carefully into it. Now, as I told you before, we want to get into some of the ways that you can tell that your movement has been hijacked. Assalamu alaikum to everybody tuning in. Brother Ronald Jackson, Brother Delanton, shout out to y'all. Assalamu alaikum. Hit us up with questions and comments if you see fit. But I'm going to go into a few things that lets you know that your movement, whatever it may be, has been infiltrated and hijacked. And then I'm going to use the teachers of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, one of the best. Well, it's all good, so I can't even cherry pick it. But one thing that we're taught in the Nation of Islam is that history best rewards research. And there's an event in the most recent history of America and foreign nations that really has a really almost creepy parallel to what's going on right now. And I'm going to bring that up in a moment. But let's go into these questions. Let's go into some of these ways that can tell you that your movement has been hijacked. Number one, how do you know your movement has been hijacked? Well, for one, are you attacking the problem or each other? Go into history. Go into history. Whenever there was a situation where a major movement, a major organization, or anything that was effective suddenly failed, right before it completely failed, right before its last breath, right before it flatlined, the individuals involved in the organization, usually prominent individuals, were attacking each other rather than the cause or the problem. That's one thing. That's a very clear piece of evidence that your movement has been hijacked. Second of all, are your allies or all lies? Measure their commitment. And I have money in parentheses for like I said, right before the George Floyd uprising started to move toward money, right when people were starting to expose the charity paper trails of where the Black Lives Matter money was going, right before somebody stood up in front of these crowds of angry white people that were helping us and screaming Black Lives Matter, nobody ever stood up in front of them and said, hey, do y'all believe Black Lives Matter? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, cut that check. Or go to your local congressman and tell them that you're willing to take a tax increase over the next 10 to 20 to 30 years that will allow us to establish a land of our own, that allow us to receive the reparations that America has given everybody, even nations and groups of people that America didn't even harm, such as the Jews. America had no part, no negative part in the Holocaust. In fact, America sent troops in World War II allegedly to help against the Adolf concentration in Germany. So ask yourself about that. Are they allies or are they all lies? Are they allies or all lies? Also, is your enemy, this is a key one right here. Is your enemy comfortable with your approach? Now, obviously, when you have 80% participation from Caucasians, that means they're comfortable with what you're saying. They're comfortable. They're comfortable with you just burning stuff down, having a fit, you know, and a lot of them were doing all the burning. But these are the same people who will burn police cars and tip over cars and break windows after a hockey game, after a college football game. They do it all the time. After their team wins the NHL finals or the NBA finals, white people tear stuff up all the time. Nobody calls them thugs and misfits, but they do it all the time. They've been setting fires one way or another all over this world for 6,000 years. But if they are comfortable with our movement, especially when you start to see political leadership kneeling and wearing kente cloths around their neck and all that kind of stuff, that's when you know your movement has been neutered. That's when you know the testicular fortitude of your movement is non-existent. Here's another one. Is the narrative changing without your permission? Do you even know the narrative? Do you even know the narrative? Is it changing without your permission? Do you even realize that it changed? And this relates to that first question. You know, are you attacking the problem or attacking each other? The narrative has completely changed. I don't even really see that many people on social media. That's the beauty of social media. It gives you the pulse of the people and what people are talking about and what they're involved in and what they're thinking. But I don't even see much talk about the actual issues anymore. I see jokes about Karen. I see, I see more instances of police brutality being caught on video. But where's the actual, where's the program? That's why the Muslim program is on the back of every issue of the Final Call. So after you read the Final Call, it always is capped off with what our program is, what we want, and what we believe. There's no sign of that. Instead, you know, it's gender warfare, it's gender preference warfare, it's Karen comedy, it's all this foolishness, but there's no actual issues being covered. And that's the way they like it, and that's why they're comfortable with the entire conversation. Then run a credit check. Like I said, history best rewards research. Run a credit check. And by that I mean check the history. Is there any shift in the movement that reminds you of past history? Infiltration, Trojan horses. You gotta check history, and I'm gonna give you a cold example in a moment of history rewarding research on this exact situation. And then last but not least, have you reached the point, and I really want you to let this one sink in. Have you reached the point where you know you're doing something that is hurtful to the cause and helpful to the enemy, but you rationalize your actions? Remember what I said, how it's easier to feed an agenda into someone's emotions than it is into their intelligence. And this question right here is an example of why. Because when you feed emotions shut down your rational mind. Emotions, it's like breaking that glass, that fire glass in any building, that fire alarm glass where you break the glass and pull the alarm. That's what emotions are like. And once you pull that alarm, it all goes crazy. And even when you get to that, I think everybody who's ever, they call it seeing red. When you get so mad or so emotional, we all had that moment where we kind of step outside of ourselves and look and say, damn, I'm really tripping. I'm tripping. But then you get people who even realize and admit that they're tripping, but then they just say, man, listen, I don't care. I feel some kind of way. And I don't care about, causing division. I don't care about putting my business out, for the enemy to, I don't care about that. My emotions. And if you, and please listen, if you think that's okay, hey, that's your prerogative. That's cool. But if you think that's okay, then you should probably draft a letter of apology to every racist that you ever berated. You probably should draft a letter of apology to every sellout, every coon, because a lot of them, their coonish behavior is emotional. It's emotional. Go ask someone about, I forgot the brother's name, maybe somebody that's watching can hit it in the comments, but you know, in the past I talked about, you know, all of the turncoats and agents that infiltrated the Black Panther Party. You know, like the snitch that was hanging around Fred Hampton. Drop his name if you know it. It escapes me at this time. Go ask a Black Panther about those snitches that were in the organization. Watch how mad they get. Ask a member of the Nation of Islam about Warith Deen Muhammad and what took place in 1975. Ask a lot of believers about Malcolm. And watch how mad they get. But in all of those instances, it was really emotion. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes, like the Holy Quran says, you know, a diminution of fruits, which can also be emotional. A lot of times when we worry, it's really just emotion. But if you get to the point where you're like, okay, and I'm gonna bring this up again, when you get to the point where you realize, hey, I know I'm acting a fool. I know I'm causing a problem for the cause. But when you reach the point where you know you're doing something that is detrimental or hurtful to the cause and helpful to the enemy, but you rationalize your actions, you say, this is messed up, but man, I just got to do what I got to do. Then chances are your movement, even if it's just your own mind, the movement of your mind has been infiltrated and hijacked. Last but not least, I'm going to get off of here, but I got to hit y'all with this. Those of you who follow the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and a lot of his great, his world travels and the things that and the friends that he's made for us, he was making those friends for you, not for him. And I don't care who you are, what your religious beliefs are. He was making, if you're an Aboriginal person, he was making those friendships with you. One friendship that he made, that he established early in the resurrection of the Nation of Islam, is this brother right here, Muammar Gaddafi. And if you can see that, take a close look, because this picture right here breaks down some of the beautiful things Muammar Gaddafi did for his people in Libya. He had free education and health care for all Libyans. If you go into any city hall, state building, or Congress here in America talking about 100% free college, universities, and health care, you'll get ran up out of there. You see how they did Barack Obama with health care, and what ended up happening is that he passed a very neutered and watered down health care program. He had gender equality. Gender equality. It was part of the Constitution, and women's rights were the best in the Middle East. The best. Illiteracy was zero. I believe Libya had a illiteracy rate of about 85% before he took the reins, and then by the time he was murdered, it was zero. Homelessness was almost zero. Man, for citizens, the income was estimated at about $12,800, highest in the region. That don't seem like much to us, but that's balling in the Middle East. Libya had the world's largest irrigation project, making water available for more than 70% of the nation's desert population. It was bombed and destroyed by NATO. Now, a couple of things that they didn't mention in this. That the oil reserves that Libya has, and had, I should say, every dime that reserve produced for the nation, every citizen got a check off of that. Got a check. Imagine back when America led the world in steel production, every American, even black folks, got a residual check off of it. Imagine if you live in South Dakota or Oklahoma or Texas, where there are large oil reserves, you just got a check in the mail for $500 a week. Congratulations for being, a resident of the state of Oklahoma or the state of South Dakota or North Dakota. That's what Muammar Gaddafi did for his people. But then there was infiltration. There were people making trouble amongst the righteous, telling lies. There was another project that Muammar Gaddafi was working on. One was a satellite project that would make Libya one of the most technologically advanced nations in the world, but also a free housing project. Not like our projects, but real quality housing. But there were a lot of delays to that because the propaganda against Muammar Gaddafi was rising all over the world. Everything was fine in Libya at first, but the propaganda. And then the economy took a shortfall. If you've been in America, if you've been alive in America longer than 20 years, you've seen a couple of recessions. You know that the economy of any nation goes up and down depending on the circumstances. So they made it like, there were corrupt politicians that were stealing the money, even though they were getting checks, even though Libya armed all of its citizens. If you really doing your people bad, the last thing you want to do is put a gun in their hand. Brother, don't do this. But imagine going upside your wife's head and then putting a gun in her hand right after you pop upside her head. Bad move, bruh. You're going to be Swiss cheese. So he had free arms to all of his citizens. But America and the Western media will have you believe that he did his citizens wrong. But pay attention to this. First of all, he went from this, look at him, he was always clean, he was always well-dressed, always regal, but he went from that to this. They beat him to a pulp, shot him, and literally dragged him down the streets of, I believe that's Tripoli. Surrounded by all of his skin folk, citizens that he fed, citizens that he housed, citizens that he employed, citizens that he did all those great things for, free schooling, free health care. But they dragged him down the street to his death. But that ain't all. Like Dr. King said, not only that, I want you to take a look at good close look at this. This is not Minneapolis circa June 2020. This is not Atlanta. This is not Los Angeles. That's a picture of a police car in the Libyan city of Beta. And it's the first demonstration that set off the so-called Libyan revolution that led to his murder. A police car burns on the 16th of February in 2011 at the crossroads of At Talhi, known as the crossroads of the spark. Sound familiar? Look familiar? Police cars burning? Now, I'm not saying that we didn't deserve to burn those police cars. And I'm not saying that our reason for burning those police cars are 100% congruent with their reasons. But this is an example of how when America reaches the minds of the people and poisons the minds and the emotions of the people, what they will do to even the best leadership. Not only that, take a good look at this picture. What you see right there is a so-called rebel, Libyan rebel, who's holding an altered Libyan flag. And this altered Libyan flag was known as the Libyan National, and you can't make this stuff up, Libyan National Transitional Council flag is flown from a communications tower that he was building for the people in Beta in July. If you know what the flag of Libya actually looks like, what they did is that they tore out the sun, moon, and stars, the crescent and star that is normally in the middle of that flag, and they gave this altered version that represented this uprising. So they tore out the sun, moon, and stars from the middle of the flag. And that was the thing that was going on all over Libya at this time. Now, this is just from the other day here in Los Angeles. The classic Black Power fist that you could find on the bottom of Afro pics that you see brothers walking around on T-shirts ever since the 70s. A beautiful symbol with a backdrop of the LGBTQ rainbow flag. Black trans, remember that? Transitional? Now, those have two different meanings, or does it? The Libyan National Transitional, and then Black Trans Lives Matter. Right in front of the Great Western Forum, where Magic and them won all them championships. This was just this week. So this is what happens. They follow the same protocol over and over and over again. They run the same play. And like the messenger said on page 100, a message to the black man, we allow this devil to play the same trick. And we keep falling for it. And it pains and hurts the heart of Almighty God, Allah himself. Shout out to everybody that was chiming in. Brother Antu, who else we got chiming in? We got Brother Sherman Muhammad, Assalamu alaikum, and so forth. But I'm about to close out, but I just wanted to go over that. And hopefully I don't feel even the need. If I do, if I feel the need to do a part 4 on this, because it's so important. Because keep in mind, I don't care what you think of yourself or your condition right now. You're a part of some kind of movement. And if you're not, you the worst of Negroes. You the weakest of Negroes. Either in your community, some type of organization, your family, friends, or it's just yourself. One way or another, you a movement. One way or another, you're involved in a movement. Do not let your movement be infiltrated. And with that said, before we get out, I want to, for those in the Los Angeles area, I want to bring it to your attention that we will be having another Operation Feed My Flock event, spearheaded by our beloved Western Regional Student Minister, Abdul Malik Saeed Muhammad. This time around, we're going to be in the city of Compton. So we're going to be representing in the CPT Saturday, June 27th from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. We're going to be on the corner of El Segundo and Wilmington. And then after that, we're going to be at the Wilmington Arms Park after that. So definitely come out, show your love. You can help us out. You can donate your time. You can donate, non-perishable food. You can also come up there and get you some boxes. If you know somebody that needs food and they won't be able to get there, then come by, pick up a few boxes for them and take it to them. You know they'll be thankful and appreciative. This is what we doing. See, this is the opposite of allowing your enemy to set the theater of your war. This is our war. This is our battlefield right here. We feeding our people physically and mentally, and this is what we're going to keep doing until we get the instruction to do otherwise. But with that said, I appreciate y'all chiming in, and I'm going to leave you as I greeted y'all in the words of peace. Assalamu alaikum.
I was told to deliver this message.
America was not built on a firm foundation. The nation called America was doomed from its inception. How do you build a nation? Killing the native people. How do you build a nation? Bringing a whole people out of Africa to America to be made slaves. This is your foundation. The world is looking at a country going to hell. You are opting to be a part of that is unraveling right in front of your eyes. You see the country cascading downward. This is America. Why do you want to get into something that is coming to an end? So we are living in the time of the unraveling of this great nation.